Hey everybody, this is Mike with the One Stop Co-op Shop, and today I'm reviewing Goblin Vaults, both the competitive and solo play. And disclaimer that I got a review copy of this one. So Goblin Vaults is a bidding and scoring game. There will be 3 cards up at a time with values from 1 to 10 from different suits. And players will place cards in front of these cards, sometimes competing with each other to bid on them and capture some of them for their vaults. Scoring areas where they will eventually end up with 10 cards total, and then they'll score points based on the icons they've captured, the placement of the cards in different road tiers, and perhaps most importantly, the success with which they fulfilled different varied goals from play to play. And solo works pretty much the same, except you're flipping random cards from an AI pile to compete in the bidding. So let's discuss 5 key things about the design in Goblin Vaults. So for my number 5 point, I'm focusing on the accessibility and ease of entry of the game. So the game seems very simple on first glance. Bid on some cards, get 10 of them, score some points. And in a way that's true, but the crazy combinations of scoring cards, the fact that every card has an icon that can score for you one way or for your opponents, a placement that it prefers to score you even more points, trump suits that make some cards worth more than others, bonuses for playing cards of certain suits and types. There's just a lot more going on in the game than you might expect at first with just a simple bidding game. But that being said, I have taught the game to several new groups, and you don't really have to pay attention to everything right off the bat. Now, I will say a really skilled player will beat a beginning player basically every time, but you can still kind of just turn off your brain and go with the flow for the first few games, and it won't hurt you too much. For my number 4 point, though, I'm up to a full pro, and that's the Warden card and Warden Actions. So when you're bidding, the one card at the top is called the Warden, and that determines what the wild suit is, or basically the trump suit, the one that can beat all others. And one player per round can change that card out at the end of the round and change what the sort of trump suit is, and that's pretty fun, can give you some control and make your hand weaker or stronger as the game goes along. And then additionally, in a cool strategic bonus, although it does add to that brain burniness I mentioned, whenever you bid with a card whose icon matches the Warden's icon, you get to take a Warden action, which either lets you discard a card from your hand and get a new one to change up your options, or often more importantly, lets you take a card in your vault, your scoring area, and move it to a different position. So yes, this whole Warden concept is part of what makes the game more complicated than it might seem, but it's also a nice strategic layer to the gameplay. In a similar vein, my number 3, which is also a pro for my taste, is the vault positioning, and this is another thing that is kind of more complicated than it seems, but can also be pretty cool. So you start out with one card in your vault that you choose freely from your hand, and then as you gain cards in each round, you have to put them in one of 4 columns, so you can't go beyond 4 columns, and then you can build them up to 3 cards per tier, per column. And there are so many things to consider here because cards are going to score if they're in their preferred position at the end of the game, and then tons of the scoring cards care about what's in a column or what's in a row. But because you're only placing one card at a time and those Warden actions can be pretty limited, you have to make some tough gut check choices. Like, okay, if I put the 3 there and then the 4, am I going to get a 5 to finish my run for that gold card? Ooh, where should I put this 2? I'm not quite sure. What can I mess up? What should I keep on running for? There's a lot of cool choices here, and it does have quite a bit of strategic depth. My number 2 is also a pro, and that's the scoring card that I've mentioned. So you have one general scoring card with 2 different sides you can play with per game, and then you have all these different suit ones, each with 2 sides, but you only use a few of these per game. And this drastically changes up what you're doing in the game, drastically changes what's valuable and what isn't, and just really messes with everything you're trying to do with your vault in really cool ways. So I greatly appreciate this. It makes the game with these little 3-card combos quite varied play to play, keeps it interesting every time. But I've sort of buried the lead here because my number 1 is the most important mechanic in the game, which is the bidding for cards. And I'm going to call this a mix for solo. It could be a pro for competitive depending on your taste. So you have a hand of cards that is diminishing each round as you play different cards. And when you bid with them, you're generally trying to win the card above, and that will get placed in your vault. But if somebody else outbids you, or you play a card to an area where their bid is already stronger than yours, you instead get to keep the card you bid with, which is a really cool touch in that sometimes you can capture cards straight from your hand, but sometimes they kind of have a 1-round delay as you win a current card, and now this new card is one that is up for grabs. So that's all very cool and exciting. What some people might not like and what pushes this to a mix, especially for solo, is it can also feel pretty random, because even in competitive play you don't really know what options your opponents have, how they're going to bid against you. But in solo you get a random card, then you bid with your card, and then you get another random card, and they get placed in columns based on these little icons down here. And it feels super random. Sometimes the solo does great against you and just like totally derails your plans. Sometimes they do really dumb things and you get to just run away with every choice you want. So I do have to say I appreciate very much how easy to play the solo mode is for a bidding game. It's hard to do a solo bidding system, I imagine. But this one does feel quite random, and even in the competitive game, it can also feel a bit random, which somewhat detracts, I think, at least for some players, from the strategic depth of the game overall. So overall, Goblin Vaults is a bit of an odd one because it looks, upon first glance, kind of like it might be a filler, but it's really a lot deeper and more strategic than you might think, which I think is great for the game because you can still play it at a pretty surface level and have a good time with it, but you can certainly dig into it quite a bit. You might want to check this one out if you like bidding games or even trick takers because it has like a tiny bit of that feeling to it, but you might want to avoid this one if you're looking for a simplistic filler. Again, it doesn't really fit that bill that much, or if you want a solo experience that's highly controlled. Again, there's quite a bit of chaos and randomness in how the solo plays. And if you want to see the solo play in action, Jason did a preview playthrough during the crowdfunding campaign. Thanks for watching, good gaming everyone, and I'll see you at the next stop.